IVM.
Welcome to Police Chowki, a special limited series on your favorite public policy podcast, All Things Policy. This series will take you behind the khaki uniform, beyond the flashing red beacon, and into the heart of the functioning of the Indian police forces. We cast a critical eye on the role and function of the police in the Indian democracy, from the silent persistence of paperwork and meticulous investigation to risky counterterrorism efforts and policing in conflict zones. We explore the need for police reform and accountability in the system. Each episode brings you a comprehensive exploration of a unique facet of policing, illuminated by the insights of a former IPS officer who has lived the life behind the badge. So join us every Monday morning as we take you into the complex world of Police Chowki.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Police Chowki. Today we'll be discussing an issue that goes rather unnoticed when we talk about police, policing and policy in India, despite being so prominently visible to all of us. And this issue concerns the traffic police in the country. On today's show, we have a special guest, Mr. Reddi. He's a former IPS officer and retired as the Director General of Police. He has served as the Police Commissioner of Bengaluru City. He has worked for long years helming the traffic police in Bengaluru City, first as DCP Traffic and later as Additional CP of Traffic. During his time, he was instrumental in introducing and implementing the B-Track project, which modernized the traffic management in Bengaluru City. His immense experience on the subject matter will definitely add value to our conversation today. So I extend a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Reddy, on the show.
Thank you. Free.
And with us, we also have Mr. Javeed Ahmad, who is a regular guest on the show. Mr. Ahmad is also a former IPS officer and he has served as the DGP of Uttar Pradesh. And I wish a warm welcome to you as well, Mr. Ahmad.
Yeah, thank you. Sri, it's nice to be back and welcome to my dear colleague and friend, Reddi, who's a very distinguished police officer. As you said, he's worked in Bengaluru as well in very senior positions. So I'm sure he'll have a lot of interesting things to tell us about traffic management, which is the topic today.
And of course, as Bangaloreans, our traffic woes are never over. And that's something which comes up. It's a coffee table conversation. It's a dinner table conversation. And I'm definitely looking forward to getting more insights from the perspective of traffic police today. So before we begin, just to set a bit of context, Nitin Pai had written this a little while ago and I'll link the article from the show notes. So essentially, when we talk of traffic, road accidents, fatalities, road behavior, traffic behavior, he wanted to put this into a framework, which is a triangular framework, right? And the 3 points are essentially behavior, which is human behavior on the roads. Second is road design, which is the infrastructural part of it. And third is organization. And this is where the traffic police comes in, which is about observance of rules, which is about demarcation of roads and so on, right? And Bangalore's road, of course, unfortunately scored poorly on all three dimensions. I mean, we know the road networks are pretty bad. The infrastructure is not well designed. Organization, again, we have a lot of issues which we'll be getting into today. I mean, there have been positive developments as well. And we want to analyze this bit of organization and traffic police in much more detail. And thirdly is behavior, which is also extremely important. And Indians seem to be lacking certain necessary driving skills, so to speak. Before we dive into all these issues, I want to know from you, Mr. Reddy, when we actually think of traffic cops, right, we often picture them as manning signals, controlling vehicular movement, making bandobast and so on. But I believe that, the duties of a traffic police extends far beyond what is visible. So maybe could you talk a little bit on, the lesser known or unseen functions that traffic cops perform of whatever is visible to us?
Thanks, Sri. I think at the outset, I must mention that, a discussion on traffic and traffic policing, particularly in the context of Bangalore, is never something that is not interesting. People are very concerned and very curious as well. So it's not just a dinner time conversation. It can be any time conversation really, right? So coming to role of traffic police, see, the traffic police is a unique entity. It is not entirely or 100% policing. At the same time, it's not entirely a municipal function. So you will find this variance across the world, where the functions of traffic police are distributed between local bodies. Sometimes very core is remaining only with police, etc. To clarify this, the heart of traffic policing is actually regulation, which is part of the overall maintenance of order. right? So police are invested with the function of maintenance of order. So there has to be order on streets. So there is a traffic. So you started off with a simple cop, standing at the intersection and controlling traffic and moving traffic up one after the other, right? Many, many years ago. Then it's come all the way now until what it is today. So essentially, we can define it as a regulatory function, right? And from regulation, I think there is a kind of a variant of enforcement, because to regulate, then you need to enforce. The wrongdoers have to be punished, which is typical police function. But they are not crimes in the nature of the Indian Penal Code. They are petty crimes or they are offences under the Motor Vehicles Act or the other laws, right? And then you have also a very interesting variant in the Indian context of management. So it so happens that worldwide, traffic police doesn't get really involved in traffic management except in India, maybe in some other South Asian countries, for historical reasons, for the fact that police were continuously held or constantly held responsible for both the good and bad, and more of the bad that happens on the roads. So they kind of assumed onto themselves the responsibility of managing, which included starting from signal installation, signal management, signal timing setting, one-way, circulation of traffic. Of course, that is also intended under the Motor Vehicles Act, where city police decides where you will park, where you will not park, which way will be the direction of the road, etc. In a rural context, maybe the district magistrate has to step in. So I would say that it's regulation, it's enforcement, and that it is management.
Right. And it is typically an urban-focused function as well, right?
You have three types of traffic policing clearly visible. One is purely urban or metropolitan. The other is highway traffic policing, which is very important, which is heavily loaded in favor of looking at road safety more than anything else. And then, of course, you have Mufassil or small town or even district level traffic policing, where you'll find them at different stages of evolution, as you might find in Bangalore, like whether it is to do with management or enforcement or regulation.
If I can just add, Shri, to what Mr. Reddy said, the traffic police, you rightly said, obviously is present at the intersections controlling traffic. But at the policy level, the traffic directorate would be analyzing traffic flow, deciding what should be the traffic flow, at what time the one-way should be enforced, what are the turns or diversions that are required for traffic to move in a smooth manner, how long the red light should be fixed, how long the green light should be fixed, stuff like that, or the volume of traffic. All these are things that are done through data analysis at the traffic directorate, and it is only the execution part is what is visible to the general public.
Right. And to perform all these functions, obviously, we need state capacity in traffic policing, right? And that seems to be a problem. The data released by the Bureau of Police Research and Development in 2021 tells us that, there's a huge number of vacancies when it comes to traffic police in the country. So around 51% of posts in West Bengal are vacant, and West Bengal tops this list, followed by Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra, where the situation is pretty bad as well. And overall, nearly 30% of the total traffic police posts in the country remained unfilled at least till 2021, which means around out of 103,000 sanctioned posts, there are only 73,000 odd personnel who have been employed. And there are two questions to it. One, of course, why is there not a state imperative in filling all these posts and ensuring that we have enough robust state capacity to carry out all the functions that you just listed? And the second is on deciding the number of vacancies, or deciding the number of posts rather. So the BPRD had suggested that the ideal traffic police strength should be based on the ratio of personnel to the number of vehicles on the road. So I wanted to know your thoughts on this. As a policy decision, do you think this is the right way to measure the requirement for traffic personnel?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Sri. Actually, if you look at it depends on the way you define the specific role of traffic police. If you want to improve traffic behavior by imposing fines, at virtually all the locations, there is no limit to the number of traffic police that you would require, right? So at the same time, if you think that all the intersections have got to be manned by traffic police to ensure that the people follow the rules, then it will be again infinite. I mean, there are 30,000 traffic junctions in Bengaluru City alone, and close to 1,000 or 2,000-3,000 may require the traffic police, but we simply cannot afford that amount of manpower. So it's also intertwined with the fact that how well are you actually educating the public in following rules to start with, say as children, as young adults, as applicants for driving licenses? And how well are you educating them on the streets as they use the roads by providing exhaustive signage, road marking? Because a lot of education happens interactively on the road. We don't realize it. Actually, you're learning constantly on the roads. And then thirdly, how are you actually making a deterrent as an educational tool by way of enforcement, right? So I think it's a kind of a mix of all these three and how you play with it. That's one part of the story. Another part of the story is that, we have moved way beyond manual intersection control, which was started off in the 60s or way long years ago in the West. We have moved on to mechanical signals, then we went on to electronic signals, and we have got now reached a stage of intelligent transport management, which means you've got interconnected signals, and through a traffic management center, they should be operating. So there are questions raised as to why do you actually need a traffic cop when there are traffic signals, right?
Yeah.
So that's been a question that's been plaguing the traffic police leadership in Bangalore for many years. Nobody has built a cat yet to say that, hey, I'm going to remove all the traffic police from intersections that have already got signals. It would be worth experimenting. I mean, you never know. I mean, there may be some kind of a sense of balance that the chaos might reach, where you will find, hopefully, that, public will behave themselves and follow the rules. But I think that is a call that the traffic police chiefs have to take. So I think going forward, I mean, if you look at an example of, let's say, a Western country, right, you will simply not find area traffic police on the road, right? So you will find them only, like Javeed said, they're in the back end. They're looking at the cameras. They're looking at imposing fines through camera enforcement. They're looking at data. They're looking at manipulating signal timings, optimizing them through the traffic management center. Much smaller number of people. So what do you say, Javeed? I think you don't really require traffic police as much as you require law and order police. Maybe, but we need to reach that stage.
Yes, I mean, it is imperative that technology is leveraged. Technology is now available and it is being adopted. Thankfully, it is being adopted. The integrated traffic management system is slowly being implemented across the country. And I think that is the way forward. As Mr. Reddy said, placing a traffic cop on every intersection is not the answer. And obviously, the requirement is also of better traffic and management, traffic rule implementation and understanding by the road users. One last point before we move ahead, Shri, you talked about the vacancies. Let me say that the vacancy in the traffic police is also a function of the vacancy in the state police, because it is from the state police strength that traffic police is taken out, number one. Secondly, while there may be a number of vacancies in the traffic police, in most states, home guards who are volunteers, there to assist the traffic police, and they are doing a reasonably good job. So we shouldn't discount that as one of the inputs when traffic management is being taught.
Right. So what I gather from what both of you said is essentially two things. One is maybe this idea that we need to determine the number of personnel on the basis of vehicle to officers ratio is a bit dated, and maybe it's not required, and we need to look at new ways of arriving at this figure. And the second thing is, yes, more cameras and less cops, if I may put it that way, right? So moving on to technology in traffic policing, and this is something I want to spend a little bit of time on because, this has been an effort for a very long time, starting from, automating signals to today's intelligent traffic management systems, right? Which is a complete system of routine road surveillance where real-time traffic monitoring is possible. So could you share a bit of insights on, how has this technology in traffic policing evolved over the years, firstly? And second, at what levels is technology being used today, other than, of course, CCTV cameras, which are visible to us?
Well, I think this is a very engaging topic for conversation for most police officers and traffic planners and traffic managers. If you want to see the evolution of traffic technology, you would say starting from a simple manually operated signal to dumps, what we used to call as dump signals, which is non-intelligent signals, which had, let's say, preset timings and plans for releasing traffic on forearm junction, given specific cycle time and specific phase time. Okay. To clarify, phase time is the time given to one arm of the intersection for the release plus the times allocated for the pedestrians to cross, right? And cycle time is the total time taken for this signal to operate all over again. That's full cycle. So cycle time can vary between 100 or even 80, 120, sometimes 160, whatever, 180 seconds, for in larger intersections. And now earlier, because the investment was involved, there's intersections which required large flow of traffic to be managed well, started off as getting signalized. We never looked at it as a corridor synchronization or an area synchronization to start with. We were like, we never had the money enough way back in the, let's say, the 80s and 90s. Then as the money started flowing in through various projects, we started looking at corridor-wise signalization. And now I think we've reached a situation where we can talk about area-wide traffic management systems, which includes like large number of intersections to be managed in as one single system. Now, there have been technologies essentially the traffic technology is all about how well do you optimize signal timings. Now, there are adaptive signals which require sensing of traffic that moves on all the four intersections or four arms. Let's put it that way. Now, this sensing happens through typically, the loops, which are called inductive loops that are laid in the surface of the road, which have happened across the world for decades. But given the road condition in India, they never took off, because even before you realize the roads got damaged and the loops got damaged, and then there was no sensing happening. So that didn't work at all. So we still have a huge gap in India and even in Bangalore in actually real-time sensing of traffic is not happening. So much, contrary to what many people may think, most of our signals still are not smart signals. They're still preset signals which depend on manual, or let's say changing the signal timings, even if it is done remotely, done basis assessment by human beings, right? Now, we are moving on to, I was in Birmingham recently to visit, I took an opportunity to visit a traffic exhibition, and I could see the technologies evolving. There are technologies that require that deployment of hidden sensors under the ground, not as loops, but as just kind of some massive bodies, like a small structure that is embedded inside, all the way to virtual loops using cameras. Now, if you have to use a camera to measure traffic so as to inform the signal about the actual traffic flows, so that the traffic signal can automatically adapt and so that the entire area can be optimized, now you require large number of cameras, which are very expensive. So in India, we have tried in Bangalore also. I think we have got a few locations where cameras are being deployed, which impose virtual loop on the roads and measure the traffic. So there is a crying need for, if you have to balance cost and benefit, there's a crying need for a new technology. And newer technologies like measuring traffic using the Google technology, for example, are all emerging at this point in time. They're not at their mature. So if you ask me about traffic technology, I think we are caught between the need to deploy high-cost solutions, including cameras for measuring the traffic flows, to waiting for a newer technology to come. So that's where we are as far as, however, smarter traffic management using manpower to actually assess and actively real-time become sensors of traffic. So this was tried by Mr. Salim, who was the Special Commissioner of Traffic till the other day. And I think there was a huge amount of improvement found in traffic movement in Bangalore during the time that he was there. And I hope that continues, because he kind of marshaled the entire traffic police manpower to look at the function of traffic management as the prime function, right? He said that, okay, you basically are ensuring traffic flow in a very systematic manner. In the absence of machinery being available, you're using the manpower to run the signals. So that was a very interesting, experiment. How sustainable, how long-lasting is another question.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. I was curious to know as to, whether any tech has been applied for making other kinds of decisions. For example, when the police decides that a particular road is one way. So is it based on some systematic analysis of data which has been captured by the police, or are these decisions which are based on just, intuitions of the police? Okay, let's close this road and try it this way. Maybe the traffic will improve. Is it that sort of a call that the police is taking? And the second thing is, are there futuristic applications of this kind of data collection of roads? In the sense, tomorrow can we decide where we need a flyover, where we need an underpass, or where we need a new road to be constructed, purely based on the available, metrics. So if that kind of decision making in traffic governance can be introduced, I think we'll be better off.
Okay, let me put it this way that, I think if there is one traffic police with whom we have to discuss about one ways, it's Bangalore traffic. Because I think over 100 kilometers of central Bangalore are converted into one ways. It all started, and as luck would have it, around the time that I became DCP traffic, various factors played into making the movement towards unidirectional traffic imposition a kind of a trend and a norm, and traffic police got completely involved. One thing I would say before coming to it, that, if you still see reasonable amount of traffic movement in central Bangalore today, one of the big factors for it is unilinear directionality of traffic that we imposed long years ago. So what it did was it gave a lot of breathing, not exactly breathing, but it gave a huge leg up to traffic movement in Bangalore in the absence of a proportionate increase in road space, right? You only have X amount of road space. So it's been also very well considered in Indian law, for example, in the Motor Vehicles Act or the Karnataka Police Act or the Indian Police Act, that directionality of traffic can be decided by traffic police or by local administration to ease the movement of traffic. So one of the things that we have to understand is that one-way movement of traffic actually reduces the number of conflict points at intersections, right? That's the basic transportation engineering norm. So it is the conflicts at the intersection points that delay the traffic. So when you reduce the conflicts from, let's say, when you say from 4 arms, it becomes virtually a 3-arm junction or a 3-arm junction, let's put it that way. If you make it one ways, then you're reducing that much more time taken at the intersection. So your throughput increases. Traffic seen more as a flow rather than as a mass, right? So now coming to the analysis that goes behind the decision making is that we always depended on local engineering colleges. For example, we depended on Bangalore University Transportation Engineering Department. They would actually do a lot of work in manually collecting those days, traffic counts, and then working out what if scenarios, right? So if you were to convert this into one way, you already collected the data on origin and destination of the traffic in that region. And then you said, if I were to do this manipulation of traffic directionality, then what would happen to the remaining traffic? Where would be the congestion points and stuff like that? So that's an engineering job, and that becomes an input for decision making in the police or in the administrative setup. Going forward, what happened was that computerized solutions came in. I'm not recollecting it. I think there was a software package called Transit, TRANSYT, that could manipulate, that could actually absorb a large amount of traffic data, millions of bits of traffic data, and then kind of throw up scenarios. So you didn't really have to implement and then say it's a trial and error, and after a week we'll revisit the thing. You could actually visualize it. So I think there are more advanced packages available today. I think you can accurately determine where the congestion points would be, what would be the benefit, and what would be the cost. Almost always traffic police one-way systems were based on some sound analysis in the background, and then only it was implemented. Initial days we used to say we will try it out for 1 month and then we will kind of revisit, but now I think things have fallen in place because of the computerized applications that are available. Would you like to add anything, Javeed?
Yeah, what I would like to add to the question that the concern that Shri raised was that one of the, the big gaps in traffic management in urban areas is that there is more than one agency involved. The construction of roads is done by the PWD or some other department of the government. A lot of roads are also manned by the municipal or constructed by the municipal body, by whatever name it may be called. And then obviously there's the police. And the crying need of, at least from my experience, and I'm sure MN would also agree, the crying need is always felt that for some kind of coordination and some kind of joint planning by these three entities which are involved in making a road and making it safe and making it more friendly to traffic. This has always been a problem, this working in silos, and I really believe that some kind of body needs to be created statutorily for things to improve on this score.
Yeah, I think there has been some development in this in Bangalore at least, because at least, the joke was that Bangalore roads first will be dug up by Bescom, which will be repaired, then BBMP will dug it up, which will get repaired, and next time you have BWSSB, which digs it for water supply or underground drainage. The cycle just continues. But the The other thing, which is sort of a pet peeve, honestly, is that, about flyover constructions. And I know we're moving away from traffic policing into the infrastructure part of it, but quickly, I do want to touch upon it because I want to hear your takes on this. We see, flyovers mushrooming all across the city, inside city roads, and especially out of Bangalore at least. The fact is, these are not very long distance short flyovers. These are very short flyovers which probably cross 1 or 2 signals max. And I believe these actually add to the traffic problem. They just shift the congestion points from one place to another and create new choke points. But what is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact that at one level of absolute analysis, you are moving traffic faster at one intersection and landing it at the next intersection that could get far more congested than when you had that intersectional flyover before, right? I think it has to be nuanced. See, first thing is that if you allow traffic unhindered, the traffic, you will realize that when it is in the periphery of the city, it's moving faster. When it gets to the center of the city, it slows down. For the simple reason that the number of intersections increases as you go into the city center, right? Because of the mesh, because of the grid network. As you go away, it becomes more in the nature of a highway, right? So the intersections become less and less, and the intersections also will be more asymmetrical because the main road will carry much more traffic in comparison to the other routes. So as you come to the city center, you'll find more symmetric intersections wherein all four arms will be almost carrying equal amount of traffic, right? So therefore, what happens is that if you allow traffic unhindered and then sit with the problem at an intersection and cry about it, that's when you think that, I must move traffic above the level and do a great separator, what is popularly known as flyovers. I think the thinking has moved beyond flyovers now to say that you manage traffic in a manner that you spread the traffic thin equally across. So you start to gate traffic as it enters the hardcore zone of the city center, and some amount of deliberate delaying becomes almost essential for you to manage in a optimal manner. And if you can add to that unilinear traffic movement systems, if you unidirectional traffic movement systems, and if you add to that some amount of tactically placed flyovers, and if you add to that intelligent transportation system, then you can find a solution. So none of these can be seen in isolation. I think all of them have got to be seen in combination with each other. So I don't think so. We can make a villain of every single flyover, right? Because it has been conventional to say that if the traffic density increased 1/1, so at any particular intersection, then you start to look at how to reduce the congestion there. And one of the methods was to elevate and move traffic forward. But if you have elevated and not resulting in a congestion next intersection or the following intersection, it's a good idea. So, and at the same time, we have to look at the cost. So, for example, steel flyovers, in my personal view, are actually fast. They are fixable, removable as well. Germany rebuilt post-war entire traffic management system through steel flyovers. I mean, whatever bad connotation it may have got in Bangalore at some point in time. But I think they are actually fast to fix and fast to relocate. So I think those are some of the aspects of it.
Mr. Ahmed, what do you think about flyovers?
You see, the problem with the way flyovers are constructed, I don't have anything against flyovers, but I have a problem with the way they are constructed. I think flyovers are more often than not, my experience is that flyovers are made for a particular or, a set of intersections, and often their alignment into the road network, so that overall there's a shift or a change in the traffic movement and things are eased. That kind of traffic engineering does not happen. One reason for that is the shortage of money, because often if you were to have an optimal kind of flyover, then it would be much longer than what you have the money for. That could be one reason. But more than anything else, this silo approach of trying to resolve traffic issues is, to my mind, one of the major issues. Flyovers per se can definitely help, but flyovers will be more helpful when they are positioned in such a way that they remove a large volume of traffic away from the city center, rather than bringing people into the city center faster. Because as Mr. Reddi said, if there are many more vehicles coming into the city faster, and the evacuation from the city center is not commensurate, if you don't have a corresponding evacuation system, then obviously the city center is going to get congested. So that kind of overall planning is required for flyovers be free from the bad name that they seem to be getting.
Right. And I believe there are also certain political economy reasons behind the construction of these flyovers and underpasses and all of that. But anyway, that's a topic for separate discussion. So moving on, I want to come to what Mr. Reddy mentioned at the beginning of this chat, that traffic police is essentially a regulatory and enforcement authority, right? That is their primary function. And the way they do it is for checking for traffic offences, catching hold of the offenders, penalizing them. And in this context, in 2019, India took a big decision. The union government amended the Motor Vehicles Act and increased penalties for different traffic offences across the board. The figures which used to be few hundred rupees for certain offences suddenly became few thousand rupees. For example, driving license fine went up to 5,000 rupees. Fine for not driving with a license went up to 5,000 rupees. Same for driving without a registration certificate. The fine for drunken driving went up to 10,000 and so on. And the idea was by increasing the fine, by making it more punitive to offenders, we'll be able to ensure better compliance on our right. Of course, a lot of state governments did not agree with this. In fact, the governments of Gujarat and Karnataka gave discounts on the rates fixed by union government. But that's a separate story. Essentially, the fines went up. I want to know from you, what are your thoughts on the effectiveness of this approach, right? Because at least one of the concepts in criminal law is what acts as a deterrent is not the intensity of the punishment, but rather the certainty of the punishment. Given that, just by increasing the fines, have we been able to ensure better traffic compliance, or have we just created avenues for increasing the bribes that people pay to the officers in charge?
So you really kind of pointed out the fundamental feature of criminology, that is, in terms of deterrence works when there is certainty. So there are, all the three aspects of that. Is there's another aspect is immediacy, right? So we have intensity, there is the quantum of punishment, the certainty of punishment, but also the immediacy of punishment, right? If it is certain that you'll be punished after 10 years, it's of no consequence. And if you are going to have to pay heavily, but you don't even know, you're not even sure whether you have to pay at all, it's not going to work. So all the three components, the intensity, immediacy, and the certainty are very important. And I think that's where there is an interplay between the three, right? That's number one. Number two, as far as evolution of traffic enforcement is concerned, it used to be like manpower oriented, constables stopping people, like for example, checking for the documents or catching people when they jump the signal or checking for drunken driving, etc. used to be the norm in the past. But I would say that most of us have moved on beyond this particular phase. Way back in early 2000s, Delhi police started automating traffic challans by empowering constables to note the traffic violations. We adopted it in sometime in 2002, 2003. And we even gave, BlackBerry equipment initially to, along with printers, to impose fines on the spot. We created databases at the back end, and all that has happened, evolved into a large system now, where Bangalore City Police generates close to 20 to 25,000 challans a day, right? So if you're having about 10 million vehicles, then I think it's fair to imagine that a number even far higher than 25,000 should be the number of offences, right? So about 25,000 challans are sent every single day. So the problem is one of plenty. So what's happening is that it's becoming logistically impossible for traffic police to actually implement the challans that they're issuing. So in this problem of plenty, there is a mayhem out there, in the sense, I really need not pay. Let me see when they catch me. And then I'm passing by the traffic police. I know I have received an offence notice. They probably know also that most of us who are on the roads have also, because there's no way for them to stop the entire traffic. So I think someone came up with a smart idea in Hyderabad, where they said that we'll give a 50% reduction, right? So even today's newspaper says that Bangalore City Police have extended the deadline for 50% discount on payment of fines. I think a quintessential cop like Javeed may not agree with this. That, there's no point you're imposing fine if you're going to be giving a discount, right? Yeah, so this discounted way of enforcing traffic for traffic violations may not be agreeable to many people, including Javeed, who's a quintessential cop, because then you're talking about diluting the intent of the police, right? And then it also looks more like a kind of a via media for collecting fines rather than achieving deterrence. I think that's for another day. This conversation and this discussion can be for another day. There may be an argument that there is some amount of deterrence, if not 100%, compared to no deterrence at all when people never paid, right? So that is one part of the enforcement story. So we have to also move completely into contactless enforcement. So if you see any European country or any other developed country, there is absolutely no physical enforcement. It's all contactless. And then the question is, we have to crack this problem of how do you, the last mile of it. You have identified offenders, you have data on them, you have video evidence of it, you have generated traffic challans running into several millions maybe a year. And typically at this point in time in the country, I think people in some, at least let's say top 4 metropolitan cities owe more than 1,500 crores to the police or the government by way of traffic fines that have not yet been paid. So I think that last mile realization of the traffic fines is an issue that needs to be discussed. I think that's another separate conversation. Yeah.
Right. It's very interesting how you characterize the problem as one of plenty, right? I mean, it's good and bad in both ways. It's good from a revenue generating angle, I suppose, but it's bad which means the offenses are so many and we're not able to enforce traffic laws. But talking about the third leg of the troika that we discussed, of infrastructure, organization, and behavior. On behavior aspect, I think the most important issue pertains to issuance of driving licenses, right? And unfortunately, a large number of Indian drivers are just bad drivers on the roads. They're not very well trained. They do not follow lane discipline. They do not follow road safety norms. You still see people riding without helmets and so on. And one of the problems is that the driving issuance system is very lax. There is hardly any serious testing which goes on, and most people know they can get a license through an agent or a broker. So that being the scenario, how do you think we can fix this system, which will have ripple effects in terms of traffic safety and traffic management?
So we must admit that there has been improvement in the issuance system where RTOs have kind of devised automated methods. There are simulation tests that are done. You cannot go wrong with that. So I think there is some amount of movement in that direction. Online systems wherein you are cutting the human interface and bringing in more transparency and obviously cutting corruption as well. So that is one part of the story. Another part of the story is that again, you really require a generational shift if you're talking about perfect traffic compliance, right? It is got to be inculcated into the population by a generation. So we are only probably tinkering at the top, right? I would say that more than the basic skills of driving, which are of course essentials, I think on top of it, more important is how well are you actually regulating and enforcing rules so that becomes a learning experience. It's like on-the-job learning, right? And how are you actually educating them on road behavior through road signage and road marking? Now, the absolute lack of road marking, for example, on Indian roads is a clear indicator that the lane discipline can never come. If there are no lanes, there is no question of lane discipline, right? So I think these things are also very, very important, particularly when we cannot transform a whole generation overnight. So they have to be actually taught while they're driving. They have to be continuing education or awareness building as they're going. So enforcement plays a huge role. Like if enforcement were to be visible and apparent and transparent, then there is some amount of fear that can be generated in the public. Again, we plow back into the problem of plenty and all this. As I said, it's a vortex that keeps going round and round.
Right. Mr. Ahmed, I want to know your thoughts on this particular issue and how do we get out of the vortex?
I think this vortex, the first thing that needs to be done, and this requires a huge social campaign or a media campaign, is that people should realize that there is human cost, often in terms of human life and limb, for poor driving. So many people are dying or getting maimed because of poor driving or rash driving or incorrect driving by our drivers who have got their licenses without the kind of scrutiny that is required to be done. Now, obviously, there has been some movement in the last few years or in the last decade in terms of how licenses are given. But I think a lot of work still needs to be done. Without that, and now with better roads and faster vehicles, the number of deaths is just going to go up. And that kind of campaign is required to be sustained over many years for people to slowly start understanding the implications of their poor driving skills and poor driving behavior. And this is something that has to be done from childhood, and it has to be done in a multimedia kind of thing, in a multi-pronged kind of thing, whether it is signages, that is also part of the solution. Better enforcement is also part of the solution. The immediacy of the penalties, another part of the solution. The certainty is also another part of the solution. I think a multi-pronged approach is required, but it should be understood that every law-abiding citizen of this country is going to use the road, whether it is the highway or the city roads, and it is his right to have safety and security while he is on the road. And the rogue drivers are a threat to that. This kind of understanding, this kind of public consciousness has to be created through various methods, and that is not only the job of the police administration. It has to be a much more broad effort and a much more sustained effort.
Right. And I think this is an interesting mix of problems for policymakers to think and solve, right? Whether be it a realization of traffic fines which are being charged, or the issue of educating our drivers to become better drivers. And some innovative solutions have also come up. For example, now there are beepers in the cars which tell you if you're crossing a certain speed limit, right? Which just alerts the driver to be more conscious and so on. So maybe such little things can also go a long way in preventing road accidents. Because although overall, proportion of road accidents in India has come down from 2011 to 2021, but the absolute number of accidents and fatalities have gone up because we have more vehicles, more roads, and more people on the roads today. And this is only going to increase. But thank you so much for this enriching conversation. If you have any final thoughts, please feel free to share. Otherwise, thanks for joining me for this chat.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting talk. Thank you, Mr. Reddy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sri. Thank you, Javeed.
Thanks a lot.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.